But I remember being 9 years old, sitting there in my living room, and I would switch back and forth between MTV, watching like Yo MTV Raps, which I wasn't allowed to watch, but I'd watch that, and then I'd go back and forth and watch the Oprah show every day. And I
Yes.
saw, I saw this interview with her and Barbara Walters, and as a 9-year-old little girl, I remember like getting it. I remember her saying that and feeling like, me too, Oprah. Me, like I remember, and her example helped me believe it was okay. Because we learn, I think, so often, and we all learn this, not just women, but it's easy to dim our own light. It's easy to, grow up and just the things take over, the bills, the kids, the responsibilities, the setbacks, and it's easy to almost lose our own vision, right? We're talking about Vision Week on
Yes.
Growth Day. It's easy to start losing our own vision.
Vision of the weight of life.
Yeah, and I remember that moment, Brendan, as a 9-year-old little girl, just hearing Oprah say that in a way sparked a vision in me.
I know that as we had talked before, I know you were speaking at an event for Erwin McManus, and I saw you, I think last year, spoke at an event for John Maxwell, and so I know you've been able to be around a lot of amazing people. You mentioned Oprah earlier, and being around some of these incredible people. What is something maybe you've learned, or maybe something somebody said to you that is maybe the biggest thing you've learned, or the best piece of advice you've ever received from some of these incredible people?
Mm. Well, I think the most powerful thing I've learned is that every single one of them deals with self doubt too. Every single one of them is a lifelong student, constantly working on building their own self worth, right? John Maxwell, in his, 70 books he's written and millions and millions and millions of copies, and so many millions of people he's impacted all over the world. He is the same as Oprah, as Tony Robbins, as Irwin. When I'm at an event with them, like John Maxwell will be taking more notes than anybody.
Mm,
I think I
wow.
take a lot of notes at events. So I would say that they all deal with self doubt, and I want to share that because for anyone listening who thinks, oh, people like that must be different than I am, right? We're in this technology driven world where we go on Instagram and, YouTube and all of that. And I love Instagram. I scroll it every day. And also, I don't see anyone on there like talking about all the real stuff they're going through. It just all looks so good. And I think for, hopefully, at least for me, it helped me feel less alone and more enough when I realized, oh, wow, even these touted visionaries, some have been my mentors from afar or heroes my whole life. They're just like me. They deal with self-doubt. They're lifelong students, constantly growing. And so I would say that's probably the big thing. But I mean, I grew up with 5 different families. You're being adopted, and I am so blessed and love my families. And also, I'm the only one that I'm aware of anybody in any of my families that's like a lifelong student that wants to go, that gets off a stage at a John Maxwell event and then sits there and watches the other speakers and take notes because I love it. You know what I mean? Like, and so it just, it was, I don't know. I think that would probably be the one thing, is just for anyone who needs to feel less alone and more enough, and thinking that, those people must be different than you. They all deal with self-doubt too. Uh, and I think also the second thing I would say is, and Oprah actually said this, that at the end of every interview she's done, whether it was with George Bush or Beyonce or an axe murderer, it didn't matter. At the end of every interview, the person would be like, how was it? How was it? And she said what she realized is every single person has this common thread where they just want to know, did you hear me? Do you see me? Did what I say matter to you? And for me, I took away one of the greatest leadership lessons, right? Which is at our core, we all just want to be seen and know that we matter. And I think, like, I remember building at Cosmetics. I mean, we eventually built to over 1,000 employees, but in the early years, I could not pay what our competitors paid. But I was able to recruit away from their companies people that did not feel seen or like what they were doing mattered. They didn't have this clear vision and purpose for why they were working so hard. And when I was able to give that, to like really see people, to remind them of what is our vision and where are we going and why what they're doing matters, because able to like apply that lesson to employee retention, but also in just in relationships, right? How many times are you arguing with your partner or whatever? And if you just stop and just go, let me really try to hear what you're saying. We don't want to say that. We want to say, no, you're wrong. We just actually hear them. And that's all they need. People just want to be heard and seen, and know that they matter. So that was another big lesson.
So,
By the
so
way,
good.
really fast to add this, I know it might be like too many tips on one show, but I
That's
write
great.
about also, I write about how to do this in the book, because in the book Worthy, and it's in the chapter called Do You See You? Because so many people feel unseen in this world. So many people feel unseen. And in particular for people, especially women, but over 50% of women identify as people pleasers, but 40% of men identify as people pleasers. When we are someone who's constantly aware of everyone else's needs and showing up for everyone, not only start to feel unseen, but we can start to feel invisible. And I talk about the importance of learning to not only feel seen, and one of the hacks to doing that is to actually see other people. And so many of us have gotten in these habits in life where we actually don't see other people. And I talk about like simple things, like, for example, if you are feeling unseen or like you don't matter or any of those things, walking into a coffee shop. How many of us do that? We're on our phones. If someone says hi, we don't even necessarily make eye contact, or maybe we do for a split second. We go about our day, we might make small talk, but we're not actually seeing each other. And one of my favorite things to do when I'm kind of feeling that disconnection from myself or from humanity or from just that feeling of aliveness is like when you walk in a coffee shop or go up to a coworker today or someone who's on your team or a neighbor, it doesn't matter, and you actually see them and you actually just ask them how they are or give them an honest compliment and just really actually make eye contact with them. At first, they probably won't even be comfortable doing it. But when you just keep that conversation going for a second and actually be interested in them, or share again an authentic compliment or observation, like, wow, it seems like you love, or you make that foam so good, like, you're so effervescent, or, oh, I love that shirt, whatever it is. What will happen when you finally see them and they allow you to see them and you make eye contact with them? The moment they feel seen, and you can try this again with coworkers, doesn't matter who, someone at church on Sunday, the moment they actually feel seen by you, you'll see a shift in their eyes. You'll see it. You'll see the moment it happens. And the moment that shift happens is the moment they see you back. And that moment, try this today in your life. The moment you really see them, and they let themselves be seen, which we're so out of practice of in our society, they let themselves be seen, you'll see the shift in the iris of their eyes. You will see it. And that is the moment they see you back, and the moment you feel seen back. And it's one of the most beautiful things that you can do to build connection, and to start overcoming that disassociated state that so many of us live in.
It's so powerful.
But I just feel it's, what if, I guess I was thinking this, which is, what if this how are we going to get there, this puzzle, this map we wish so much that somebody would just deliver to us, what if it's so close that we are constantly just tripping over it? Like, what if the portal, the door to all of it, is the simplest yet most untapped thing that we've ever done, which is just to fully believe in it. And then it's like, we were talking about Sherry Salata before, and she said to me, when people say, how do you become successful? You were executive producer of Oprah, every successful person over the last 3 decades, them. And what is it that you all have in common? And she said, it's not what are you doing, it's who are you being. It's who are you being, right? And I thought so much about Oprah reading your book because you talk about her in here, but I feel like what you have in common with her is there was a resonance, it was a vibration, it was a knowing, and it was a stepping into that knowing, and it was just that, and so it is. And it's like, and from there, the next piece of the how was revealed because you stepped in. But what do you say to people when they're like, no, it can't be that? It has to be that there's some formula or some degree or some add whatever you want to the list of things I need in order to accomplish the thing, which will never happen. How do you help people really get that believing in it really is there for them?
Yes. And what you just described, the last 5 seconds of what you just described is literally somebody talking themselves out of their own calling. It's us talking ourselves out of our own calling because it's more comfortable to do that, because all those things, right? And, but again, oh my gosh, I feel like it comes at the price of the person you're born to be, right? And here's what I'd say to that question. I think it's easy to go, oh, yeah, that girl Jamie, yeah, she was a Denny's waitress and she bagged groceries at a grocery store and pushed grocery carts in and all those things all those things, but maybe she just got lucky or whatever, right? Maybe she just like all those things. And here's what I've learned and here's what I believe. I do not think that where you come from determines where you're going. I don't think that any of the opposition you face in life, whether it's people rejecting you, people not believing in you, like I've gone through so many years of rejection, and I share the story in this book of, 3 years of like I created this product, and I had this dream, right? Because I have hereditary rosacea on my cheeks, and I could never find makeup that would work for it, and I was working as a television news anchor. I knew nothing about the beauty industry, and took a big risk and poured all of our money into this business, and I finally created something that worked for me, and I really thought this was going to be huge. But I also wanted to use a different type of model than the beauty industry was typically using, because I had this realization, right, that my whole life, because I was like, why can't I find something that works for me? I never realized nothing out there, no other products work for me. And in realizing, wait a minute, okay, my whole life, all I've seen is images of models where they all look, they're photoshopped, airbrushed on commercials on television and in magazines. And I've never actually seen anyone that has rosacea on their face and on top of it, how do you even know if they're wearing the product they're advertising? Like all these things. And I had this big,
such a good point,
right? Where I was like, okay, for me, and I know you talk a lot about this too, about, your why and your mission for, why so many of us identify the why behind what we're doing. And it's interesting because I realized early on that when I created this product that finally worked for me, like, yeah, of course, that was a part why of why I did it. Wanting to help so many other people out there that couldn't find anything that worked for them, make their lives easier and better, was also part of my why. But what I did early on, just to share this tangent for a quick second, in case it adds value to anybody listening, because I feel like so many people in their careers, when they're going after their dreams, I feel like they'll identify their why, but it just sounds good. And it's actually not like deep enough, right? Like they'll say, oh, I want to do this because I want to buy a house, or I want to help my kids with college, whatever it is. And those are great, awesome whys. And they sound so good. But like, unless it's deep, 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 deep to your core, it's not going to be strong enough to prevent you from quitting when times get tough, right? And I've done a lot of things wrong in my journey, but one of the things I did right was early on, I just peeled back those layers of why am I? And by the way, going through 3 years of hearing everyone say no to you and getting down to under $1,000 in my bank account and not knowing if my company was going to make it. Like when you go through all that opposition, when you have no proof of success around you and you have no one saying this is going to be amazing, you're going to do so good. And like, every time I checked in with my gut, I felt like I was on the right track. But what also kept me going was like, I really did the work early on of peeling back the layers on like the why, deep, deep, deep beneath the why. And for me, it was like, oh, because I had this realization, because no other makeup would work out there. I had this realization that it wasn't just about, I wasn't just doing this to make a great product. It was like, oh, I'm going to launch this company. I'm going to use women that are models of, and men and every gender identity of any, whatever age, size, skin tone, skin challenge. I want to use all kinds of models and call them beautiful models and mean it, right? And because what I realized is, oh, in this journey of trying to find a product that worked for me and I couldn't, I realized my entire life, even since growing up as a little girl, every time I would see these images in magazines, like I'd see them and I would aspire to look that way. But they also always made me feel like I wasn't enough, always. Right. And my deep why, like for this not giving up after years and during years and years and years of no's, was like, I wanted to shift culture in the beauty industry around inclusivity, but also around the types of images used as models and the definition of beauty. And I wanted to do that for every little girl out there who's about to start doubting herself, and like every grown woman who still does. Yeah. And like that is what drove me through all of it. Anyhow, it was so many years of opposition and of hearing no's from anyone. And to your question on, well, what's the difference? But like, what would you say to people who are like, oh, here's the deal. At the end of the day, and this is after going through so much, like we could talk for 50 million hours about the stories in this book that I've never shared. But like one of the big things to share is that I believe, and I believe every single person has what it takes to go from like underestimated or facing opposition or filled with self-doubt in their own head, to go from unstoppable. I believe every single person can do it. And I really, truly believe the first criteria for that is that they need to want to, right? They have to want to. And a lot of people just decide, oh, for all these reasons, this isn't possible for me. I believe step one is deciding you want to. And after that, it comes down to mastering belief. And that's hard. But when I look back on my journey, when so many people are like, how did you start with nothing and build $1 billion company from your living room? It's like, yeah, I worked really, really, really hard. Too hard, frankly. I worked really hard. And I didn't give up. Like every time I got knocked down, another no. Yeah, it was hard. Yeah, I cried myself to sleep so many nights, but I didn't give up. But to me, that is just like the price of admission for being an entrepreneur that keeps a business going. For me, the single biggest thing, and I would say this to everybody, despite what their dream is, but like for me, building $1 billion business from my living room, the single biggest thing I did right was like, I made the decision to believe that I could. Yeah. And that is why I wrote this book, because I believe that, it doesn't matter if someone's dream is to get on the PTA board and decide they like the other women. I don't know it doesn't matter what your dream is. To me, learning the steps of and being on the journey of breaking through, learning how to break through that self-doubt, tuning it out, tuning out other people's opinions, and truly, because so many people can't even hear their own intuition, truly learning how to hear your own gut and tune into and learning to trust yourself. And then learning how to truly believe that it's possible for you to become all that you are and all you're called to be. That I believe that's possible for everyone. And that really is why I wrote the book.
Yeah. And you do such a good job of giving that belief over. And I don't know how you do that, because it's such an esoteric and it feels so far away. But I think because your story is so vulnerable and you're so exposed and it's so something we can see, like from the beginning of the book to the end, you're like, oh my God, I could actually see those steps and how she was able to step forward into each new challenge. You really do feel like you grow as a person just by reading it. The thing I find with all of our listeners, and 90% of them are women, this feeling of imposter syndrome where it's like, I don't believe that I would ever want someone to give me money or pay me for something. Like I think I'm a fraud. Like there's so many people better at this thing. Like, yeah, I want to start an Etsy shop, or I want to teach yoga, or I want to make my own makeup line. But Jamie's done that. Bobby Brown's done that. Someone else is making candles. It's this feeling of shame. What if I put this out there and like, who am I to like take up anybody's time? That is just so prevalent.
Yeah.
And
so prevalent.
I don't even get it, honestly. Like just the amount of rejection you just shared, plus you articulate it in the book, and also being a little girl who was like in this sort of different kind of a situation where you were adopted. Like I think so many kids would feel intrinsically rejected, and this is the feeling that it's so easy to go to that place of I'm not enough and I'm a fraud.
What got you into personal development, Jamie? I would love to ask that today. Like to have vision for your life, you have to first want to improve it.
Yeah, I've always loved it. I mean, I remember, Brendan, you'll remember this, but decades ago, seeing even infomercials about it, right? And seeing, personal development tapes. I've always loved it. Growing up, I mean, I was the only one I know of in my whole family, and I have like 5 families through divorce and adoption and all kinds of stuff. I would just read quote books and literally geek out in it. I would in high school keep journals filled with my favorite quotes and, watch speeches from some of the most incredible speakers, Dr. Martin Luther King. I remember days I was such a dork. I remember going to the high school library because you could check out videos, and I would check out some of the great speeches and watch them. So I remember sitting in the school library watching Dr. Martin Luther King speak. I remember sitting, you know what I mean? I've always just loved it. And I think it's because, and I think probably everyone part of the Growth Day community maybe shares this, where we kind of have that little inkling inside of us that we have something, that special we want to give or create or serve or impact. And I've always kind of had that feeling deep down inside, even from the time I was a little girl, long before I understood it. And I remember, and this is bold. Do
you think that's like the striving spirit? I want to hear your bold thing, but do you feel like you said you were young? How many of you feel like it's because you're young, you have like a striving spirit, and it's just something part of you versus something interrupted life or forced you?
Yeah, sometimes we have those ambitions or those thoughts or those, and then all of a sudden the world teaches us self-doubt. The world tells us all those things that it's easy to listen to, like you're not enough and this and that, and right. So, but I mean, I remember just from the time I was little, and there was a moment, I want to say I was 9 years old, sitting in my living room. You might remember this moment where I was Oprah Winfrey, was being interviewed by Barbara Walters, and this moment made the news everywhere. And she said to her, I think it was 9 years old, and she said, I always knew I was destined for greatness. And I remember this moment, and the press freaked out, and all of a sudden she got a lot of negative press for it too, because I think people weren't used to hearing, especially a woman, make such a bold claim like that. But I remember being 9 years old, sitting there in my living room, and I would switch back and forth between MTV, watching like Yo MTV Raps, which I wasn't allowed to watch, but I'd watch that, and then I'd go back and forth and watch the Oprah show every day. Yes. And I saw this interview with her and Barbara Walters, and as a 9-year-old little girl, I remember like getting it. I remember her saying that and feeling like, me too, Oprah, me, like I remember, and her example helped me believe it was okay, because we learn, I think, so often, and we all learn this, not just women, but it's easy to dim our own light. It's easy to, grow up and just the things take over, the bills, the kids, the responsibilities, the setbacks, and it's easy to almost lose our own vision, right? We're talking about Vision Week on Growth Day. It's easy to start losing our own vision.
The weight of life. Yeah,
and I remember that moment, Brendan, as a 9-year-old little girl, just hearing Oprah say that, in a way sparked a vision in me. And I think like, I love that we have these conversations. I hope Growth Day Morning Show sparks everyone else's own
Well,
vision in
talk
them
about
too.
vision on this. I'm gonna brag on you for a minute, because it's like, here's a 9-year-old girl who sees Oprah and gets this idea, oh, maybe greatness is okay for me too. And then, builds a $1 billion company. I'm not talking about Oprah, I'm talking about Jamie here with you guys. Then Jamie ends up being like neighbors with Oprah, more or less. And it's like, wow, she built into this vision she had in so many different ways. And both her and I have been able to give back to so many of our mentors and give our platforms to mentors. And that really is magical, that you have these interactions with people who inspire you, then later get to work with them. I got to go on a tour with Wayne Dyer. I got to, have all the big names on my stages now. And I used to buy their tape. I love what you said. I used to buy their tapes. I used to go to the library, public library. Y'all know what a public library is? I go to the public library, I'd get them for free. I love what you said too. You had quote books. I read quote books like they were fiction novels. I used to have a collection of over 150 quote books that I'd bought and read like a book. And I'd just write them. And then I'd say, oh, what do I have to say about this? And that's what started me writing quotes.
Wow.
I was like, oh, I like this quote about ambition. What would I say about ambition? I like this quote about confidence. What would I say about confidence? And I started posting my quotes on Facebook, and then it became, the thing. But it was all part of the interactions you had of inspirational people, inspirational speeches that you saw young. I had the same thing. Young. I saw role models. I listened to inspiring speeches. I read quote books young. So parents out there, get your kids seeing some personal development, listening to some personal development, getting excited about education and learning, not just Zoom, but like real personal development, personal growth in psychology. And, who knows how they'll turn out.
You want to know what's some parents out there might relate to this. I'm a new parent. So I have a 2-year-old and an 8-month-old. And I have not seen Sesame Street in decades. And now I see Sesame Street, I see cartoons, I see all the stuff. Out of everything I've seen, just to call this out, I have to give Sesame Street props.
Yes.
They weave in personal development. They weave in personal growth into these lessons on believing in yourself, on inclusion, on, trying every time you get knocked down. I'm like, I have a whole new, now as an adult woman who's 43 years old, I have a whole new appreciation for how brilliant Sesame Street is. And I'm just like,
yes.
Yeah, I'm blown away. But I agree with you, because because my daughter will, say everything, oh, she loves Elmo, but she'll talk about all the different cartoons. But after watching a lot of them now, I'm like, oh, it's Sesame Street that I try to make sure she sees over and over, because those lessons, right, on just like, all those things, believing in yourself, knowing.
It's just like, it's two-sided. They're really good at, Sesame Street's good at character education and teaching kids social acuity. Like, how do you read the feelings of this, inanimate object, right? How do you read feelings is what Sesame has been always about. And teaching, kids about honesty and integrity and, caring for yourself, they're the bomb.
So good.
If you all love Sesame Street, I want to hear favorite characters for
Yeah.
sure. By the way, we're live every day, 7:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on Instagram and Facebook. So when I look off camera, if you're on Instagram, it's because I'm looking at Facebook, and Facebook vice versa. But I'm seeing people literally from all around the world who are commenting about, these topics we're talking about. And I bring that up because y'all, what we're trying to do with this Growth Day morning show and with Growth Day, my company, is we are trying to start this encouraging conversation in your head, but also let you know there's personal development fans and fanatics and dorks like us all around the world who checked out books, who listen to CDs and tapes, who are striving. So if you're the striver in your family and they make you feel weird about it, no apologies, keep striving. If you're the person who's into reading the books and listening to the podcasts and doing your workout, but everybody else around you is just the complainer and not taking action and, no self-responsibility, that shouldn't minimize your light. You don't need other people's understanding, approval, or even participation. to keep chasing the vision you have for your life. Like one great, untold advantage I've had in my life, Jamie, is I don't expect people to support me. I grew up in a place where people beat me. I grew up in a place where people minimized us. I grew up in a place that was economically depressed. I grew up with very little expectations of people around me at all. And so that gave me this independent, I'm going to make my own way and I'm going to do it either way. And I think that in one way that was good because it made me self-reliant. In another way, I think I wish I had asked for help earlier in my, I'd say early 20s specifically. So it's like personal development. We always talk about self-awareness, self-responsibility, self-reliance, but a huge part of personal development is your environment, your community. And so everybody here who joins us Growth Day morning show every day, thank you. We love that you're weird like us. We love that you can chat down below and share about what you learned on Sesame Street or what book you read this year. And you are geeking out about getting excited about for today too. Even if you have like lots of obligations and hardship the rest of this day, we start with reflection about what's important in life, reverence for life. We start with the joy Jamie brings to this world. Just look at her smile. You're like, every time I see her in the morning, I go, I'm ready. Let's go. Let's have a great day.
I am obsessed with an idea that you have in the book about how all the hard things are going to, like we started with that quote, they're either going to break you or they're going to make you. And really that's up to you. And the stories you share in the book are really, they draw you in with they're both entertaining because they're well written and well told. They're gut wrenching at times because I can imagine what it would be like to go through that. But they act ultimately as a yellow brick road in a way that I found very enticing in your book. And one of the bricks on the yellow brick road was that your father was an alcoholic. And you said something in the book that I was really impacted by, given my wife, Lisa, and what she's like. You said, my dad loved me and he was a kind and gentle man who quietly struggled with alcoholism. And the way that you described that was very generous. And you said, but there were times that you would sit and stare at the clock and because you had to wait for him to wake up, which your mom would be off working. And so sometimes it could be hours of waiting for him to wake up, and he would wake up, or you would get to the time where you were allowed to wake him up, and then he would ask you for an hour or two, and then I just imagine you sitting there watching the clock flip until he finally gets up and you guys can hang out. And in that you said, my dad inadvertently taught me that women are superheroes that have to be stronger than men, because that's what my mom was, a superhero who's essentially doing everything by herself. And I was like, I know that it is, Jamie, I don't wish difficulties on anybody. But man, when they're looked at from the right lens, they make pretty extraordinary people. So that's a story you tell early in the book. The yellow brick road then leads to a photo of you and 7 of your friends, so you and 6 other people. And you break down. Every one of you guys has overcome. It's almost absurd. The fact that out of 7, 2 of you were adopted. There's breast cancer, there's learning difficulty. I mean, it was crazy. And yet, each and every one of them is absurdly successful. How do people harness difficulties like that to become something powerful instead of, leaning into the victim side, which anybody would understand, people pulling the victim card from that. But how do you pull something else?
The very first and most important thing on how is you have to want to. And I think that every human being can easily go into victim mentality on a lot of things that have happened in all of our lives, right? And it's a mentality that actually can, I think, reward you in a lot of ways, and also become a justification too for staying inside your comfort zone when it comes to things like going after your dreams. And it makes sense for a lot of people, right? And again, I think there's a time. I mean, I'm not going to speak to people that, I'm not going to speak to a lot of the really hard things that require a lifetime of work to figure out. What I will say is therapy is the best thing I've ever done in really understanding this. And I actually talk about that.
Does it allow you to recontextualize? Is that the idea?
Yeah. And to understand it at a deep level. And by the way, your show, like this conversation, to me, these are the things that are so important that we invest in ourselves and do, right? Because I mean, I don't want to stay in a place where it could be easy to stay at in my life. I think that the quote you started out with, like, you know, when these tough times happen, you know, do you warrior up or do you victim up? Do you level up or do you give up, right? The up is up to you. And I do believe why I share the story of my 7 closest friends is because I think this is important. I think a lot of people out there are like me and maybe have loving family, loving friends. But if you were to turn the volume up on all of them and they were to be your only inner circle, it'd be really easy for self-doubt to take over. It'd be really easy to dim your own light. And I talk about my journey of how I chose my circle around me. And it's never based on a commonality of life experience. It's my closest friends. And I think this is important for everyone listening, because a lot of people are like, oh, you know, I don't have an inner circle that empowers me. How do I find one? You know, I would say impact theory and impact your university. That alone can be a part of your inner circle. That's a voice and conversations and information that you want to turn the volume up on. And I talk about this because I think this is universal for everyone and so important to do this. A lot of times people build their circle of friends based on who they went to school with or, you know, things they have in common and all the stuff, right? I mean, it's a group of people from work because you're around them all the time, whatever it is. And I think that that's not always the right thing. I think who your circle is so important. And for me, I go deep on this in the book and talk about each one of their stories because I want to drive the point home that who you do surround yourself with, and when you judge them by their heart and how they pour into you and champion you and don't tell you this crap you just because you want to hear it, they tell you the real truth, which is so important. They don't get jealous when you're flying high. They want you to fly higher. I talk about this commonality of traits, and yet my closest group of friends have literally almost nothing in common. You know, their backgrounds are so different. They have different faiths and no faith. They one of them was homeless all growing up, then lived in the projects, and then figured out how to build her own circle and become an entrepreneur. And she figured out how to turn down the volume of negativity and lack of dreaming of all the people around her, for the most part, that she was raised in. And how did she turn that volume up on her own, like, inner light? And I share this common thread, really just to inspire a mindset shift sometimes of, oh, you know what? My circle of friends, you know, each person listening right now, my circle of friends, they don't need to think like I do or pray like I do or love like I do or anything else. But like, if I surround myself with people that are truly telling the truth, loving me authentically and uplifting and dreaming big with me, and calling me out on the BS when I start to like talk myself out of my own truth, right? Which we all do. It's a lifelong journey. I'm talking about the power of finding people like that and surrounding yourself with them. And I think they can be people in real life. And I also think that they can be people that you let pour into you who maybe you've never even met, like you, like your show for people. You know what I mean? I think that that's really powerful. Who we let speak into our lives and who we turn the volume down on but still love anyway is so important. Because one of our biggest mistakes is turning the volume up on the people just because we love them and they're our family. And then all of a sudden, that's all the noise we hear, and it impacts our whole life.
Talk to me about the ability to turn the volume up and down. That was one of the things I found really extraordinary in your book. Like, if I were going to do like a spoof of your book, it would go something like this. Somebody was really fucking mean I cried like a motherfucker, and then I walked in the next room like a warrior. Like, it's that over and over and over.
I love that.
Like, every time. Well, I mean, you actually have a whole chapter in the book about swinging your big balls, which we should definitely talk about. But first, give me the idea. How do you turn the volume down? When you said that earlier about the guy who said, look, people aren't going to buy makeup from somebody that looks like you. How do we grab the volume knob on something that gnarly?
Yeah, I mean, it is such a disciplined practice. It's such a skill. It's hard. I mean, just yesterday, I had someone do something that I thought was like a super close friend, and I was just blindsided, and I felt so betrayed. And listen, we all go through these things, and they're hard. And one of my friends many years ago, Bob Goff is his name, he taught me this, and it just stuck. I just feel like it was so important to talk about it because this tool that Bob had taught me, where he talked about your own microphone and then the volume dial. And he basically, I imagine, right? Because, you know, that I have this microphone. Everyone listening right now, imagine you have your own microphone, and you have to get into really good practice of like who you hand your microphone to and let speak into it. And what I had to learn, one example of this is, you know, my dad, who was an alcoholic, who was a good man with a really bad addiction, and loved me the best way he knew how with his own capacity. And I remember I was, you know, working, I was always super ambitious. I wanted to get a car and go travel, all the things. So I had 4 jobs in high school. And, you know, I was working, one of my jobs, I was working in a health club. And I started as a receptionist. And then they said, well, if you sell memberships, you'll make commission on those too. And I started selling a lot of memberships. And I was like, this is great. And so after high school, I didn't go to school right away. I moved out, got my own apartment. I was making like $55,000 a year, which was more than my dad at his job he'd been at. And I never forget when I made this decision I was going to go to school. I was like, okay, because I just wanted to get out, meet other people, and like figure stuff out. And I remember when I told him I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to go to school. And he was mortified. He's like, what are you doing? Like, do you know how much money you're making right now? I mean, he was so upset and so worried about me that I was making a huge mistake. And so I remember even in that moment, you know, we all have experiences like that in our lives with our family, right? They're seeing things through their own lens of experience. But whether it's a story like that, or it's just a friend that you love hanging out with and you go to the gym with only, but anytime you share a hope and dream, all of a sudden you feel them lower your vibration. Like you feel it, right? Because they don't get it, or they don't like it, or whatever it is. Bob Goff taught me this, that basically you learn, oh, I'm going to take back my microphone from them on those topics, right? I'm going to talk to them about my workout today, or in my dad's case, you know, what's happening on the news or whatever. But I started learning with my own big hopes and dreams. I don't give other people my microphone who are then just going to literally lower my vibration because of their own lens of limitation. And it's the skill you develop. And when you imagine holding your own microphone, listen, we all, you know, if you are blessed to have a family or friends that you love, it's not like, you know, you want to just X them out of your life because they don't understand your hopes and dreams. But learning to just not share them all with them, hold your own microphone, talk to them about other things, like what's on The Bachelor, or like what's going on with whatever, right? And love them, but put those boundaries in place. And then the other thing is the volume dial, and that's big. And, you know, people have said things to us that have hurt us, probably universally. There's probably not a single person out there that hasn't had someone say something to them that hurts them deeply. And it is human nature to relive it over and over and over and over in our own head, to the point where we carve a groove and it's like it starts to stick and take root. And I think it is so important mentally for me. Like every time that dude who said no one will buy makeup from you, and there were so many other rejections that I talk about in the book. You know, when I went to Sephora and felt like I didn't belong and I didn't fit in, and
all those things. You know, a lot of times the most hurtful words we hear are the ones we say to ourselves and the ones we make up and telling ourselves we're not enough and all that kind of stuff. And I have to be mindful and intentional and literally imagine myself when those thoughts come up, stopping them, turning down the volume, and then turning up the volume on something else until I believe it.
You know, probably more than anybody you know, and certainly in your case more than anybody I know, like we're really doing whatever this is we're doing for service for you and I. Neither one of us financially have a need to do it. I gave away all the proceeds from my book. You're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
How is service to other people changed your life or created more bliss in your own life? I just want to know that, because for me, I feel the most worthy oftentimes in my life when I'm in the service of somebody else.
Yes.
You know, I actually feel worthy. I don't always feel worthy that I'm capable of doing it. But when I'm in the effort and attempt to serve somebody, I feel more connected with my own worth when I'm serving another person.
Yeah. So, you know, in the book Worthy, there's a whole chapter on fulfillment, right? And first of all, self-worth is the most critical piece, because you can do everything right. You can have self-confidence, you can be growing, you can be contributing and serving. But if you don't have self-worth, you're never going to feel truly fulfilled. So you have to have self-worth, which of course the book's packed with how do you build that, right? But then you also need self-confidence, and you also need growth. You need to be growing, stretching, like in some area of your life. And it could be simple things like growing in your faith or growing in your golf game, right? It doesn't matter what it is. You have to be growing to feel fulfilled, but you also have to be contributing, meaning doing something bigger than yourself. And a lot of people miss that. They think, oh, if I just make enough money, if I just have enough people love me on social media, if I just whatever it might be, if you are not contributing, you'll never feel that deep source of purpose and fulfillment. And two big ways on how we're like, well, how do I contribute? I have nothing to offer. So many people think that, right? And you and I have a friend, Rory, that always talks about how we're best positioned to serve the person we once were. And another way to put that is so often the pain we've gone through, the setbacks, the things that sucked, right? It's like when we're able to then use those and help other people make it through the things we've gotten through. It brings a deep sense of purpose and also understanding of the cadence of the calling of our life and everything we've gone through. But also there's simple ways to give back. I mean, literally just smiling at a neighbor. I mean, it is that simple. There are people, so many people, I'm going to cry if I think about this and talk about this, but so many of us, if you make eye contact, and Ed, you're one of the best people I've ever met at this. I feel like it's why we're such good friends, because we both see this in other people. You're one of the best people I've ever met at seeing other people, like truly seeing other people.
Let's just be real. We both know you're the best at that.
You're amazing at it. And anyone who wants to go, how do I serve? You know how you serve? Walk into the coffee shop or wherever you're at and see someone. Actually see somebody and just say hi, or how are you? Or, you know, I almost guarantee you I'm going to cry. I almost guarantee you for so many people, if you walk into any room you're in today in your life and you actually just see somebody, you're probably going to be the only person that day that sees them.
You're so brilliant. You're so brilliant. So where I started practicing this was in places like coffee shops, because I didn't feel worthy to do it in like business environments. So I actually practiced it like in grocery stores and coffee shops, and I recommend everybody do it. And so let's just say you went to order your coffee and the barista's there. Hey, what can I get you? Welcome. And you just take a second and there's a pause. I do this now as who I am, but at first I had to practice. And so I would let them pause and I'd go, hey, how are you? And I'll just take a second. How are you today? And you look at them and you hold the glance and actually wait for them to answer you. They feel that energy. And the first few times I did it, it was awkward. And then I went, well, I get the added bonus to my coffee today. I connected with this human being.
Yes.
And as I'm walking out, I felt better. I know they felt better, but I felt better. What I didn't know until I read your book is I actually felt a little bit more worthy. And then when I went into business meetings, I had a little bit more of the worthy bucket filled up because I did exactly in the exact environment. You go to a cashier at a grocery store. How are you today? Like, and you actually listen and say it a little slower. Hey, how are you? That's not the same thing as how are you?
Yeah.
And they feel you actually want to know and you care.
Yes.
Slowing your life down like that. You're like, what's that got to do with business? I don't know. Best person I know at doing that is you. You said I'm the best person you know at doing that is me. And we're two of the richest people in this entire space. So there's some correlative property to it to business as well, right? There's got to be.
And two things happen. You see that other person. So now all of a sudden you're in service of something bigger than yourself. But when you see that other person and they realize it, they then see you.
Yes.
The moment they realize you saw them is the moment they see you. When you actually see someone else and in that moment they realize it and then they see you, you actually feel seen. And here's something that is so powerful and profound and huge when we realize we do this in our lives. Is so many of us, and I'm talking about no matter where you're at in your career or your goals or your ambitions or the version of success in your life that the world celebrates, right? Whether it's having the kids and the whatever it is, no matter where you're at in that, like we are so tempted always to actually still live our lives hiding in plain sight. Never actually showing who we truly are, never actually allowing our true self to be seen, right? Just showing up with the parts of us that the world celebrates. And we start creating barriers of disconnection in our lives. But more than that, right? And we wonder why we're not fulfilled in relationships. But more than that is we create a barrier of disconnection with ourselves. We don't actually see ourselves. And just to give this analogy, for everyone listening, right? For you, for me, for everyone watching us, is maybe you remember the moment as like a little kid in class, and think back to when you were a little kid, maybe 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, the very first moment when you knew the answer, but you decided for the first time ever not to raise your hand because you thought, well, what if I'm wrong? What if I get made fun of? What if I no longer belong after I do that? And that is the for so many people, the moment that self-doubt starts to set in, the moment we become aware of these things, the moment we start to shrink our self-worth and our self-confidence. And so that moment we start hiding in plain sight. And then what does that look like today as an adult? For a lot of people, it looks like, oh, you're on a Zoom meeting with your team and you have an idea, but you don't raise your hand. You don't share it, just in case it sucks, right? It looks like, oh, you're the boss and maybe you're crushing it and you're hitting numbers every single quarter, but you actually have some novel ideas to innovate and move your company or your industry forward, but you're not going to do them because you're scared to take a risk, right? Because you're crushing it now. That is hiding in plain sight. It looks like maybe you're the extrovert that walks into the room and can entertain everyone else, but no one actually knows what you're really dealing with.
Yes.
Right? You're hiding in plain sight.
That's the most profound thing. You said that the other day. I do feel like people hide in plain sight.
Yep.
By the way, ask yourself, am I doing that?
Yeah.
Am I playing small? Am I shrinking? Do I not raise the proverbial hand in so many moments in my life when I could step forward and take my power?
And to add to that too, Ed, is when you ask yourself this, right? What are the ways you're hiding in plain sight in your life? And it might be in work. It might be in your romantic relationship. It might be in your friendships. Do you know how many people feel like they've got to play a part to fit into a friend group? But then they feel lonely because those friends actually don't know them for who they truly are. There's so many ways we're hiding in plain sight so often in our lives. And the most important thing you can do is not just identify it. And I take you through so many exercises on how to do this in Worthy, in the book coming out, which you can pre-order now and get a special live Zoom with Ed and me if you do it.
Worthybook.com/Ed. Okay.
That's right. And it's going to go away. So it's so do it now. But I go deep in this because the most important thing is not just to identify in your life all the ways you're hiding in plain sight, all the ways that self-doubt is impacting your life, but then to identify what is hiding in plain sight already cost you in your life. What does it cost you in your goals and dreams? What does it cost you in the depth of connection you have in your relationships and in your friendships, right? What does it cost you? And then when you really go through the work of going, what will it cost you 5, 10 years from now if you don't change? And you start really opening your eyes. We're always wired as human beings to avoid pain. And when you really do the work here and you understand what it's going to cost you, what it has cost you, what it will cost you, that pain will be greater than the pain of, you know what? I might get rejected, I might lose some friends, I might be embarrassed, people might not get me, but I'm not going to hide anymore. Yeah. I'm going to show up and I'm going to be seen. Like, not just the parts of me I think I need to be, but like the true parts of me. I am so blessed to have friends like you who sharpen me all the time. That is so, so, so important. And also, you don't need to hold out for a hero in order to go after your dreams. You don't need it. It's an excuse. It's a lie. It is an indication of unworthiness to believe that we need somebody else before we're enough. Or once that, person shows up and I'm married, then I'll be enough. Once I have kids in my life, then I'll be enough. Once I get that dream mentor, then my business will take off. All of it is a lie. It's a lie that leads to self-doubt. And it's why I wrote this book, because it's packed with truths that wake up worthiness. Because when you don't soar to the level of your hopes and dreams in life, you always will plateau at the level of your self-worth. Yes. And when you get that right, it changes everything. And by the way, I'm getting so fired up, not to like go into the personal growth world or anything, but so what I realized is, like, so much of the work you hear thought leaders doing around overcoming limiting beliefs, you might have a limiting belief that you'll never make a lot of money, or you're too young or too old, or whatever it might be. You can do all the work of overcoming those limiting beliefs. But if you do not do the work on overcoming the limiting beliefs about worthiness, it does not matter, because you can accomplish everything again and go, okay, I believe I'm smart enough now. I believe all the things. Those are building your self-confidence. If you don't do that innate work of building your worthiness, then you'll sabotage all the stuff that you bring into your life.
When someone's in a relationship and they have this amazing business idea together, or one person's got this idea and they say, I would love for you to join me in this company or this project or this, art, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you're like, this is exciting, let's do this together, we're gonna launch this and see if it works. What is your advice for people who are married or going to be married or in a relationship about working together? Do you think they should? If they do, what should they create contracts early on, even though there's this trust and respect? What would you do differently, or what advice would you give someone to ensure that they could still maintain a healthy relationship and make a successful business?
I think you have to have such rock solid emotional intelligence and communication.
Hard. That's hard.
I think it's the only way.
You can't get offended. You can't be.
And you have to be able to communicate your emotions when they happen in a healthy way. I know. And, I know a lot of people now who are even two friends that are running businesses together, and they go to therapy. They go to, just
smart.
like the way couples would go to therapy. Yeah, a lot of friends that are co-founders go to therapy. I think it's really important.
I think it's healthy.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's hard. But I get why people want to do it. You trust that person.
Yeah, and you want to do it with someone that you love or
fun.
Appreciate with, so you can build it together. But when things get hard, that's when it's challenging.
Yeah. And the odds are not in anyone's favor when they're going to start this. You know what I mean? It's and there are people that end it and they are able to stay friends or whatever, but it's
very
rare.
hard, very challenging.
Yeah, and you just have to really ask yourself: is your relationship worth putting at risk? Is your friendship worth putting at risk? But here's the thing, Lewis, is our humanness, our human nature wants to believe it won't happen to us. It's what everyone else goes through, but for me, my friendship's rock solid, or my marriage, or you know what I mean? And so it's hard. Sometimes it's just a thing that we go through and then have to decide, is this something that, you know what I mean, that we want to do again.
So here's the thing, you've done such amazing things with It Cosmetics. And I know, we've talked a little bit about it this year. We're working on, inspiring people to go after 1 million dreams together, to help each other, all of that. And I think it's so easy to look at somebody like yourself and say, okay, you took something from scratch. Literally, you and your husband, Paulo, started in your living room and you eventually sold it for over $1 billion. It would be easy for people to say, oh my gosh, she probably wanted a cosmetics company when she was 2. Maybe she started when she was 5, right? But that was not necessarily the dream to start with. Tell us a little bit
Right.
of how this blossomed.
Yeah, it wasn't the dream at all. And I get messages every single day, usually on Instagram, saying, "Did you get lucky? Did you have connections? Did you have?" It's like, no, none of that. And I realize so often we just see the outcomes of things when they're, or the highlight reel. And that's why I'm excited to do your show and also just write this book, because I think like sharing the real journey helps everyone else when they're launching their own dream, or maybe they're scared to go after their own dream, helps them feel less alone. So yeah, one thing you've talked about in one of your shows about this idea of sometimes our setbacks become our setups.
Yes.
That's really what happened to me when I launched this dream in my living room. And just to share a little bit about that, just for anyone in your community listening right now, especially if like they're feeling they're in the season of setback or in the midst of a setback,
right?
That's really how this whole thing started. So I thought I was working in my dream job. And, since I was a little girl, I always would, sit in my living room and watch Oprah. And I always thought like, oh, one day I'm going to share other people's stories with the world. Like I always want to do that. And I was working in television news as a news anchor, and thought I was in my dream job. And I started going through a season of setback, what I thought was a big setback. I got a skin condition called rosacea, which my skin is bright, it gets bright red with bumps everywhere. Sometimes it feels like sandpaper. And so I went to the dermatologist and I learned there's no cure for it. And I'd be anchoring the news. I tried all this stuff to try and calm it down. But I'd be anchoring the news and often live. While I'd be on the air in my earpiece, I would hear from my producer, "There's something on your face. There's something on your face. You need to wipe it off. You need to wipe it." And I knew,
which
like,
I'm
Mitch,
sure totally helped you to focus and calm down, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and then it's like when we go through these times, I started this kind of season of self-doubt where I would, like, my inner critic got so loud, and I would be live anchoring the news thinking things like, am I going to get fired? Am I losing our viewers, changing the channel? I went through this whole season, started trying to find any makeup product out there. I never had even an interest in creating a beauty company. But I started, trying every product out there, and none of them would work. And I had this kind of moment where I had this kind of this gut feeling. Like, I think when dreams start to brew in us, or when there's like a seed planted in us where we have this dream, it kind of started that way, where I was like it was like a little inkling, like, wait a minute, if I could figure out how to launch it, how to create a product that works for me, I bet it'd help a lot of other people. And then I would kind of like silence that dream, and my head would take over. Oh, Jamie, you have no connections. You have barely any money. You don't know anything about the beauty industry. And you're in your dream job right now. Right. And so I went through that battle. And I think everyone listening to us right now probably, like, really, if they get still, they probably know right now, if there's a dream on their heart, or something they know they're supposed to create or go after or offer the world, or start painting again or start dancing, right? They kind of know. But sometimes our head talks ourselves out of our own dreams.
Yeah.
So
We call that
moment.
essence of a dream, right? Like that, because I think sometimes even the word dream, it feels too heavy, too big. Like people are like, oh, I can't go after that dream, or I don't know all that's there, or all that it will take. And it's like, all right, we'll just lean into that essence of the dream. And I love how you gave yourself that permission to first kind of look solutions for yourself, but then to be able to say, what if? What if? And I love too how it seems like very quickly after that, you also started to say, what if we did it differently? Because that was really something you started to do very early on, to be able to say, hey, a lot of the marketing, a lot of the ads around cosmetics don't seem to be all that real, or for real women. And I love how that really started to become a mission for you as well. How quickly after getting the essence of the dream and starting to walk it out, was that why of being able to say, all right, this is, I'm doing this for someone else too. How soon did that happen for you?
Yeah, I realized in the midst of like, why can't I find anything that works for me, when I started trying to try all these products, I realized, oh, wow, my whole life, I've never seen anyone in the ads that looks like me, that has skin problems, right? You just see Photoshopped ads. And I kind of realized that there was never a product that works for me, but also never a product that even showed people with skin like me. And I want to say something that you said in the very open of our conversation that I think is really powerful, especially for anyone listening. You said, maybe you've never sat at the cool kids club or the cool kids table at school.
Right.
And I just want to say, for anyone who feels like they don't fit in, or they maybe don't belong, or they're not like everyone else, I really believe, Mitch, that can be your superpower. Because I think, like, I came into this beauty industry and I didn't fit in, and I was not. I mean, I didn't realize launching this company how it would be 3 years of being told no from all the retailers, and because everyone sees, oh, wow. Because, today, at this moment that you and I are talking right now, It Cosmetics is the largest luxury makeup company in the country, which is insane.
It's
because
amazing.
for 3 years, every beauty retailer said, no, you're not the right fit. Women won't buy makeup from models that look like that. On and on and on. Change your packaging, right? And I think that why we eventually were acquired by L'Oreal for so much money is because we ended up doing something so different that, like, and unique and odd, that didn't fit in, but that people connected with, that it ended up being valuable to them. And I just think so many people listening right now, we're always told often in our lives to fit in and to conform, and sometimes when we fit in, it can actually be a disadvantage in a way, because we start thinking the same. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And I don't know, sorry, that just like came out, because I just think anyone feeling like they don't fit in, I think if you stick to who you are authentically, I really feel like that is when you step into the calling on your life, like, right? And I think, like, it's so tempting for us to because we all want love, we all want connection, we all want those things, and it's tempting to do it at the price of who we are. And when I look back at this journey, about turning a dream into into something that impacted now millions of lives, I think that there were moments when people told me to change what we were doing, that was never going to work, that if I wanted to get in their stores, I had to do it the way they wanted me to do it. And those are the moments that I think could have stopped this whole thing from happening had I listened. You know what I mean? And I don't know, just want to share that.
Well, I love that. I love that, one, you would hone in on that, because I so agree with that. But also, I think that you make that point so well in the book, of being able to take those things that maybe you've seen as your limitations or your doubts or the things that have caused you fear, that if we just look at those a little bit differently, they literally can be our superpower. And I agree with you. I think, I mean, especially with the story, and I confessed to you before we hit record that I've not worn your makeup. I'm not an expert on the cosmetic industry, all of those things. But what I love about your story, and the more that I've dug into it, it truly is, obviously you've put together an incredible product, but the way that you've gone about it and doing it differently, which I think in some ways you had to, like, bolster yourself. You had to push through those no's. Those no's made you even more, like, I don't know if it's the right word to say solid, but to be able to say, hey, we are choosing this. We are not doing this by accident. We are not doing this because it's easy. We're doing it because we feel like that's the right way to do it. And that's bolstered you to help you then navigate the storm. And I do want to say that, some people might hear this and go, oh my gosh, they went from their living room to selling the company to L'Oreal for $1 billion. It's like, oh, that's an overnight story. It's all those things. You guys, we're talking about hundreds of hours a week, working hard, paying yourself very little to nothing, and really fighting for this dream, which I think is also beautiful. And you've also surrounded yourself with incredible people. Now, I've gotten some questions from listeners. We're going to go after those in just a second. But one of the things is, I think what I loved about your story is that, so many things about your story, but you got the essence of the dream. You started to experiment. You saw the need. You saw the need to offer a product, but also promote that product, present that product in a different way. But I was curious, because so many people get the essence of the dream and immediately see the list of things they don't know or don't have, right? What's one of the ways, do you think, like, what was key for you to give yourself that permission to say, I don't have all the answers, I don't have all the connections, I certainly don't have the big bank account. What gave you, or how did you find that within yourself to be able to say, but I'm going to take that next step?
Yeah. Well, I think sometimes, and I talk about this and believe it a lot, that I think sometimes knowing when to let go of a dream is as important as knowing when to go after one. And while I was in that spot of going, okay, my gut, my essence, so to speak, is telling me to launch this company, but my head is saying you're not qualified.
Right.
You don't have the right connections, all that. When I look back, and by the way, when you talk about, the early years, it was 3 years of hundreds of no's, and we got, we couldn't afford to pay ourselves the first 3 years of our company. If we ever had a date night, which was a miracle, we would go literally to the Costco, the outdoor Costco concession stand. We get $1 hot dogs.
Yeah. You can get a lot for a couple of bucks at the Costco. That's exactly right.
At least, and it tastes good, which is the good part. But that would be a date night. I mean, it was really tough. And there were so many nights I cried myself to sleep because it was another big no from a retailer, or I didn't know how we were going to keep the lights on. It was a lot of years. And in the book, and believe it, I go into details about like some of the scrappy things we did, like how, we figured out how to do things when we couldn't afford to hire people. And I go into that because I think it's so important, because you don't see that stuff on social media. You just see everyone's highlight reel. And I just think like, it's important for people that might, feel like it's just them struggling or not getting traction or hearing rejection after rejection. And when I look back at all of this, and I talk about so many things I did wrong in the book, but one of the things that I did do right, it wasn't that I somehow was smarter than someone else or anything like that. It was really that when I would get still and I would hear my own gut feeling, which for me is how I hear God talk to me, is in my intuition, right? But some people may call it the universe. Some people might call it just their own internal knowing, right? When I would hear that internal knowing, I would make the decision to trust it. And for me, that was one of the biggest things, because there were nights I literally would just cry myself to sleep. And I'd wake up in the morning thinking like, oh, was that huge rejection from QVC really real, or was that a dream? And then I'd realize it was real.
Very real.
And I'd be like,
very,
no.
very real.
And I mean, there were some really tough rejections. About 2 years into the business, we got a call from a potential investor that was a big private equity company. And I was so excited because they had a huge track record of making all of these products in grocery stores, big household names, and they loved our product, and they wanted a meeting, and we did a meeting, and then we showed them our product pipeline. And, we were several meetings in, and I thought, wow, if they invest in us, A, I'm not going to go bankrupt, and B, maybe they can use their connections to get us in these big beauty retailers that keep telling me no. And we got down to the final meeting, and I'll never forget this moment, because my husband and I flew up for this meeting, and we were standing about 3 feet from the head investor. And he says to me, congratulations. We really, really think your product is fantastic. But it's a no, we're going to pass on investing in IT Cosmetics. And we want to wish you all the best. And when I said, okay, can you tell me why? Because feedback is usually a gift. And he was literally about 3 feet from me in person. And he says, do you want me to be really, really honest with you? And I said, yes, please. And he said, I just don't think women will buy makeup from someone who looks like you with your body and your weight. Wow. And I remember, Mitch, in that moment, here's the thing. So 2 things. One, I went out in the car and cried later, but I instantly felt, like a lifetime of self-doubt and body doubt. All those things kind of flood my body. But I'll never forget this moment when he was saying that to me. Of course it hurt. Yeah. But when he said, I just don't think women will buy makeup from someone who looks like you with your body and your weight, I got this feeling inside, and I can remember it like it was yesterday, that just said, he's wrong. Yeah. And I actually never got mad or it was weird. When you talked about the why earlier, because we all
Yeah.
identify, it's so important to attach a why to any dream. But I did the work early on of identifying, like, really, why am I doing this company? And it wasn't just to create a great product or to solve my own problems or to help other women, which was certainly all those things, but I wanted to shift culture in the beauty industry. I wanted to create a business where if I ever were going to make it, I wanted to use models that were all different ages and skin tones and skin and sizes and skin challenges. And I wanted to shift that definition of beauty for every little girl out there who was about to see these ads and start doubting herself the way I did growing up, and every grown woman who still does and person who still does. So I knew how important my why was to me.
Yep.
So when this guy says to me that, I realized, instead of getting mad, I think this is really important when we're going after our dreams, to not take rejection personally, because I realized him saying that to me, him passing on investing in my business, was really, he was just as much impacted by a life of the beauty industry as I was.
Yep.
He was making an investment decision based on what he thinks you need to look like to sell product. And so, and one more thing.
I love it. No.
Well, 6 years, I didn't hear from him for about 6 years. And 6 years later, when L'Oreal acquired our company, because it was such a big deal and L'Oreal's public, they disclosed the purchase price. So all of a sudden, in this one day, it's all over the Wall Street Journal homepage, everywhere. Like, It Cosmetics, L'Oreal buys It Cosmetics for $1.2 billion cash, this whole big thing. And I heard from him that day for the first time in 6 years. And he said, "Congratulations, I'm so happy for you. I was wrong," this whole thing. And I learned it would have been the most successful investment in his firm's history. But the other thing, and this is just, I want to share this in case anyone listening to you and me right now, like, is in this season of rejection, right? Is there's these famous words, and I don't even know who said them, but they're famous words that say, rejection is God's protection.
Yeah.
And like, when we're going through rejection, doesn't feel very good. Doesn't feel at the time, like, how is this protecting me? Especially when it's unfair, it's hurtful, it sucks. But and I have so many examples of this in Believe It, but the book, but just this one story is like, had he believed in me, Mitch, I was so desperate, I probably would have given him most of the company for almost no money.
Yep.
But because he didn't believe in me, 6 years later, my husband and I were still the largest shareholders when we sold to L'Oreal. And it just, I don't know. I just think that there's so many stories like that where I just think it's important that we have our perspective of faith also when we're going through those tough seasons.
Well, and I so agree, because it is that whole thing of, and I think you and I share a very similar faith, which is awesome. And we've got people from all different faith backgrounds, but it is so powerful when we start to realize that those setbacks, sometimes that adversity, although it is brutal when you're in it, like, I can only imagine that felt like a real punch to the gut. But think about, like you said, that adversity in some ways is something you needed to dig even deeper. In some ways, it like proved your thesis even more, of saying this absolutely needs to be fixed. And if somebody's going to do it differently, we got to do it. Right. And I also, it did also protect you from then giving up a majority stake and all of those things. It's just incredible, but it's not easy, but it's amazing. And I agree with you. You have so many different examples. And I think I loved it in the book. So many different examples where that adversity, that setback, time and time again, really was a setup.
Ladies and gentlemen, rock this house and welcome to the stage, Jamie Kern Lima! Baby Kern Lima!
Every single one of us has had someone tell us we're not enough. Every single one of us has had someone say words to us that hurt.